Great to be here with you all. Again, my name is Dr. Joe Pazmany. I have watched a couple of these talks. It's really exciting to be invited to be able to share some of this knowledge. I'm sure you all woke up today thinking I need a good conversation on feedback. So I'm glad I could oblige you all and get you all some a little bit more information about feedback, maybe some techniques, maybe some tools. The whole goal here is if you can leave this conversation and feel like you can implement something, then we've done a pretty good job here. So I'm just going to kind of go through what is feedback, some of the importance, maybe some of the reasons we're pretty adverse to feedback, some considerations about how we give it and receive it, and then I'll actually give us like a practical tool or two that will kick off our question session. So throughout our entire chat, I might ask you to throw your hands up just to kind of get some thoughts, but don't worry if you don't want to share it, that's absolutely okay as well. So feedback, I know we get a lot of it all the time. How many of us view feedback mostly as like kind of constructive criticism for the most part? Throw a hand in the air for me. Okay, okay. Is there anybody who views it otherwise, or is it that kind of really just the main way we see it in our lives? It's kind of just people give us things that we need to change or improve. Nick, see it a different way? Okay. Yeah. And I think that it's good to see, and I having this chat versus having you all chat, I would say there are a couple different ways we can give feedback. I think there are ways we can give it like constructive criticism, which is something we're very used to, but there's also things like affirmations, there's acknowledgments, there's compliments, there's nonverbal communication. So we're always getting feedback. Feedback is really just us getting some kind of a response from our environment. That could be something where we're actually operating in an environment. That could be where we're working with other people. But all feedback is us getting some kind of a response. When we use feedback to benefit us, it can actually be really powerful because it allows us to improve how we understand ourselves and how we work with others. But a lot of the time, we don't get feedback very often. We don't really get feedback that kind of tells us our best parts. We usually just get feedback that maybe tells us where to improve. And oftentimes, we don't actually have an opportunity to have a conversation around feedback. And so, for all those reasons, people are pretty adverse to feedback. If you are getting feedback 2 times a year from your boss telling you what you don't do right, and they just give you everything to change and then don't talk to you again about it for another 6 months, it's hard to look at that and say, yes, I would love to have more of that feedback on a regular basis. And so that's kind of the trick is if we are conditioned in a way to not seek feedback, we don't really have the opportunity to improve in the same way that we would if we do. And so if all we think about is constructive criticism, we miss out on an opportunity because feedback is an opportunity for us to just improve what we're doing. That could be, hey, you're already doing something well. That could be, hey, maybe try doing something different. But if we never seek it, we're kind of stuck where we're at and we can't really go in a variety of other places. So I'll bring up a few more thoughts on feedback. We'll get into some like approaches, some tools, some tips, because I feel like all you seem like folks who can apply what you need, what you know. And so just kind of giving you some tools might give you some more stuff to continue to work with. So I would say feedback exists on a bit of a spectrum. On one side, we have imposter syndrome, which is basically everything is feedback that we take and try to implement in our lives. You know, we don't know what's right. So anytime we get feedback, we're trying to put it into play. On the other end of that spectrum is CEO disease. We're a CEO, we're successful, we don't need to listen to anybody. So we don't get feedback from anybody. My recommendation is we fall somewhere in the middle. There is going to be feedback that's going to be really beneficial to us that we should implement. We should absolutely use it in our lives. There's going to be feedback we get that maybe doesn't quite line up with our styles or maybe isn't appropriate for us. We don't have to use that. So finding a way to kind of figure out what feedback is actually relevant, what feedback maybe doesn't apply to us is really important. Otherwise, we either take no feedback in or so much feedback in that it can just be overwhelming for us. And I'll kind of go into a bit of a story about some of my students. So I teach college classes, and one of our assignments is called a 360 feedback assignment. I have my students go and talk to 10 people in the class or outside and get feedback from them. And the students are terrified of this. They just think everybody's going to come in and tell them all the things they need to improve and change. But oftentimes, 95% of that feedback is affirmations, things they do well. There might be some improvements, some little considerations, but most of the time people are getting really good and affirming feedback. Hardest part, taking that first step to do it. One of the students for this assignment actually created an opportunity with her boss just by having a conversation, opened up an entire communication channel to give and receive feedback differently. And so while we might talk about how this impacts our lives, this really has a lot of impact on every relationship we have, whether it's in our personal lives with family and friends, whether it's in a professional world. Because if we're asking people what they think and we're respecting and valuing their opinion and actually putting it into action, one, it's going to build trust in our relationship, but two, it's going to give us more feedback to continue to improve. And a lot of the time, like I said, we're already doing all the right things. So it's just giving us that confirmation, that pat on the back that, hey, keep doing what you're doing because it is exactly what you need to be doing. So let's have a couple of just kind of tips, approaches, and these are considerations for both when you give feedback, but also when you receive feedback, because we kind of exist on both sides. We probably have people in our life we trust who will give us a lot of feedback. There's probably people who come to us and get feedback from us regularly. And so being thoughtful of these on both ends can just help us be that much more effective as coaches, as mentors, but also as learners and people who are students of life as well. So good feedback changes a behavior, but preserves the relationship. The biggest thing that I see happening in a lot of feedback conversations is that there isn't a lot of consideration given towards the relationship. There's feedback I want to give you, but it's not how can I give this feedback to somebody to make it really effective for them? How can I temper this message in a way where they can actually learn from it and grow from it? So really good feedback finds a way to think about the person, that relationship, and provide a level of information, a level of consideration, a level of insight that lets them change their behaviors. If you change a behavior and ruin the relationship, it's not good feedback. If you keep the relationship and don't change a behavior, also not good feedback. And so it is that careful balance of how do we give this information to somebody, but do so in a way where they can actually go and internalize it. I'm sure all of you have probably at some point in your life gotten feedback from somebody and it has not been presented particularly nicely to you. And I'm sure after you got that feedback, your response was probably not, I'm going to go implement that right away. It was probably, you know what? I didn't like that, or I didn't agree with that at all. And so we don't implement that feedback. And so our approach is just as important as our content. Even if we have the best piece of feedback given in a very disrespectful or unthoughtful way, it can go nowhere fast. And so having that ability to build and keep that relationship, but also change behaviors really does show that you are balancing how you're giving that feedback with what that feedback is. The next one I'm going to say, and it kind of lines up, is why are you giving that feedback? Sometimes people just give feedback because they have something on their mind. I didn't like how you did this. I didn't like how this, maybe looked. I wanted to tell you something. But if we really want to help the people that we are trying to help with feedback, we're giving it to them to learn. We want them to improve. And so if I'm giving you feedback because I didn't like something you did, that comes across very differently than if I'm giving you feedback because I want you to learn something. And so having that intention is really important, because if we are just trying to, satiate our ego, if you will, it's not going to be helpful feedback. If we're genuinely trying to help somebody learn, they're going to be much more open to that. And so even how we step into the conversation allows us to get a very different outcome potentially from what we're doing there. I would say the next one's going to be understanding how people want to receive feedback is crucial. How many of us have been an absolute bystander in a feedback conversation? So like somebody's come up, said, I've got feedback for you, giving you feedback, and they're already gone before you've even been like, I'm willing and open to take this feedback. Toughest part is if we don't become our own best advocate in these conversations, we're just going to be bystanders. Somebody's going to give us feedback and run through, and we're never going to have a chance. So I always encourage people, create a feedback contract. Has anybody ever heard that term before? See, we're learning, folks. Good stuff. Feedback contracts, something really simple, and that is just, how do you like to receive feedback? Well, I want it written down. I would really like it in person. I want it right after the fact, or maybe I need a little break. Give me a sandwich method. Give me something I did well, maybe an improvement, something else I could do well. But if you know how you want to receive feedback, creates a different conversation. Because then instead of somebody saying, I have feedback for you, here it is, they say, I have feedback for you. And you say, hey, here's how I like to receive feedback. Oh, okay. Well, let me adjust my approach. And then in those conversations, it becomes a conversation. You can ask questions, you can learn, you can kind of go a little bit more into it because you are part of it versus somebody's just kind of dumping a bunch of ideas and thoughts on you and you are just more of a receptacle. So when we turn these conversations into actual back and forth, we learn a lot more. We get a lot more out of it. And it's that much more beneficial in the process because we can walk away really feeling like, oh, I understand their perspective versus somebody just told me what I needed to do differently or what I needed to do. And then the last thing is, folks, feedback is all a perspective. So even a person who might be right 100 ways over, they just might have a different perspective than you, might have a different operating style, might just approach things differently. And so you don't have to use all feedback. Use what makes sense to you. Use what clicks for you. And when you are able to do that, you just improve. You're able to improve how you work with others, improve how you understand yourself, improve how you show up in communities and organizations and companies. And you don't have to make massive steps every day. It's the little improvements, the thinking about what people say and how you approach situations that can be really, really helpful. So I'm going to give you two last tools. One we just talked about, which is feedback contracts. Highly recommend. Take like 3 minutes today. You're going to have a break after this session. You know what? While you're waiting for the coffee to heat up, whatever it is, just write down really quickly 3 sentences. How do you like to receive feedback? Whatever that looks like for you. Could be really simple, could be really complex, doesn't matter. How do you like to receive feedback? And be willing to share that with people next time they're like, hey, can I tell you something? Sure, would love it in this particular capacity. Another tool I'm going to recommend is called a plus delta format. And basically, this came from a company I work with, Leadership Inspirations. But a plus is something you do well, something you should continue to do for the future. A delta is like change, something to think about improving. Whenever I give feedback to people, I put it in a plus delta format. Things you did well, considerations for improvement. Because in that way, it's really easy to give feedback that people can easily just go, okay, I understand where improvements can be. I understand maybe where I can make some changes. But it's a quick tool that allows you to easily assess, share, and allow other people to really internalize some of that feedback. And again, always tempering with this is just my perspective, and you might approach things differently or have a different perspective, and I absolutely appreciate that. So, folks.